Kevin Kinkead has a nice post up at crossingbroad.com that kind of highlights what Phoenix did last night, and, Kevin, why it looked like the same old Ben Simmons. And I guess when you see that, and the rest of the league will, is there any reason to think that we've seen a evolving or expanded game down the – we will see an expanding game or evolving Ben Simmons?
No, not that I know of. Not from what we've seen on the floor so far this year. Yeah, it looks like the same Ben Simmons that we saw last year, And
now, have you thought that all season long? What we've seen through 6 games, if you said, I've seen this Ben Simmons already.
Yeah, I mean, I have.
Yeah.
I don't see anything that. I mean, if you want to go to the defensive end, I think he's been a better defender so far this year. I mean, if you're looking for where he's taken steps forward this year, I think it's definitely more on that side of the ball. It also helps that they're stronger overall as a team defensively, so I think it makes everybody look better. But yeah, I mean, I look at Ben Simmons. If you pull his shot chart up right now, he's taken one shot outside of the paint, literally one out of something like 60 some shots. I think 89.9% of his shots have come like right around the rim, and then he's taken a couple little like short range, like 6 to 8 footer kind of things. But yeah, I mean, his field goal percentage is down. It's 49% right now. He's about a 55% career shooter. His free throw percentage is 56%, which is what it was as a rookie. He got up to 60% last year. Assists is pretty much the same. Rebounds is the same. His steals are up, obviously, but yeah, what's the point of doing all these videos? All these edited clips that we saw over the summer. Keep working on them in practice. If you're not going to do it, you got to do it.
Yeah, well, you got to do it for the gram sometimes, but that doesn't always work out for the production on the court. And Kevin, 5 games into the season, the Sixers had the highest percentage of points in the paint in the entire NBA. On Saturday night in Portland, they scored 84 of their 129 points in the paint. You know where I'm going with this. Last night, they were outscored 48-32. They had 32 points in the paint, and you have to look at how they decided to guard Ben Simmons, with Bane specifically just sagging off, and how that impacts the spacing on the floor.
And keep in mind who's coaching Phoenix.
Correct, but to wrap it up, you have to think that teams this year especially are going to follow suit in that strategy. And what does Brett Brown do? Because I didn't love what Brett Brown did last night.
No, it's interesting, too. And I think if you're looking for a positive response, first off, if Joel Embiid is available to play that game, that's not a defensive strategy that you can employ.
Yep.
Because you can't have, if Embiid is on the floor, you can't have put your center on Ben Simmons and let him sag off because, Joel Embiid's down there anyway. You would have needed Aaron Baines to guard Joel Embiid, because you can't put Saric on him, so it just would have worked out that way. But, yeah, they tried to open it up a little bit by making Ben a screener for Tobias Harris. And, early on they had some success with that a little bit, because that forces Baines to kind of step up and guard him, to come out of the paint a little bit. And, the issue that you get into there is you saw Tobias. He was actually pretty good in those sets, but, he was shooting a lot of mid-range jump shots coming out of those pick and rolls because Ben's not a popper, right? So he's not going to, pick and pop to the 3-point line. He's not even a guy who's going to pull up if you give him the ball back on the roll and shoot a floater or a 10-footer or something like that, or an elbow jumper. That's not going to happen either. So because his guy is able to kind of sit back a little bit and they just play zone, it's called zoning the screen. They just sit on the zone. Tobias as a ball handler is going to have to kind of settle for mid-range jump shots. And then you get into this whole side argument of whether you like mid-range jump shots or whether you don't from an analytics perspective. But, you saw a little bit of this last year where Milwaukee would kind of sit Lopez and Giannis back a little bit and invite, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid to both shoot. That's kind of what Milwaukee did all year. So what they did was they just sort of played the other side and get J.J. Redick some open shots. So that's one option for him. But it's just I think the disappointing thing is that this is not something new with Ben Simmons. I swear that the first time I came on and did this show with you guys, I think we were talking about the same exact thing. And I think the next time I did the show with you guys, we were talking about the same exact thing too, and it's like, you take it and reframe it in a different way. If you say Mike Gill, if you go back to Mike Gill's first year with 97.3 ESPN and the people from Town Square Media, your bosses came to you and said, hey, Mike, we really like your Sixers, your Eagles, and your Flyers knowledge, right? But we want you to get better with the Sixers, right? And if your Sixers knowledge was the same thing 3 years later that it was in the first year you started, then what? You know, if there's no improvement there, if you're not going to talk about it, then what's the point? I mean, I feel like it's the same thing with Ben Simmons. It's like, you know, we've known that this is a thing. It's not new. You're just waiting for him to do it.
Right. As you write at crossingbroad.com, Kevin Kinkead is with us. We've seen this movie before. And the point is, my question for you, Kevin, is then, yes, we've talked a lot about this over and over. Even if Ben Simmons was an improved version of the one that we've seen for the first 2 seasons, that's not good enough, right? An improved version of what we've already seen is still not a good enough version of Ben Simmons.
Well, that's correct. And situationally, it's because his weakness happens to not mesh well with what playoff basketball is. You know, his weakness manifests itself in him not being impactful in the half court, in the fourth quarter, in close games. You know what I mean? So you can't hide that weakness very well. You can get through 82 games and he can dunk on people and hit a bunch of stuff at the rim and play really good defense. But when it comes down to, you know, slugging it out possessions with the Toronto Raptors in Game 6 and Game 7, where he can't really do anything except sit in the dunker spot or run as a screener for J.J. Redick or something like that, then the manifestation of his weakness, I feel like, is different than other players in the league, you know? So that's the thing that really stands out to me, is that situationally it does not match up well with where they need to be. Literally the place that they're trying to get to takes you on a collision course with Ben's weakness. I think Ben's weakness shows up the most in those kinds of situations. But, you know, I think if we're going to try to advance the story and say that it's maybe a mental thing with him, like what does it take for him to finally get over the hump and start shooting these things? Maybe you reframe the narrative, and instead of saying like, well, Ben Simmons does 4 really good things well, but he can't do this one thing, and the one thing is killing him. You could say, imagine what you will be when you can do the one thing. You know, so just try to flip it and try to do it that way or something, and maybe that gives him the understanding of saying, hey, you're an all-star player now, which he defiantly told Jack McCaffrey a couple weeks ago in the scrum. But if you have a jump shot, your ceiling is LeBron James. You know, you are a perennial MVP candidate. So I think somebody kind of needs to flip that on its head and say, stop focusing, stop making it seem like it's the negative, the one thing you can't do, and think about what kind of player you will be when you actually can do that one thing.
Yeah, and it's a blessing and a curse, in my opinion, Kevin, with this team, because they have their identity already, and you already brought up the point. If Embiid's healthy, that matchup is never given an opportunity to take place, because you're not going to put Baines on Simmons. You're going to put him on Embiid, and that whole dynamic is going to be completely different. We're talking about something else today. So when this team's healthy, they're going to run through a lot of teams and win a ton of games. But you fast forward it to the postseason, and it's a different game, like you said. So how do they work on this? Are you confident that even if they win 50, 55, 60 games, they're not going to be doing it necessarily in postseason fashion, postseason style of basketball? So there's always going to be that lingering fear, I think, in everyone's minds, is it not?
Yeah, and that's going to be Brett Brown's task this year. And the positive thing, if you're looking for, it's funny that this team's 5-1 and everybody's so negative on them today, but that's just where expectations are, because the expectation is to win a title, you know. So as it should be, I think the reaction is justified, you know. But the good thing is that Brett Brown's going to have the entire year to kind of help this team evolve in the half court, you know, build some offensive sets, find out what they're good at, find out where Tobias Harris is best at, Al Horford, and kind of just slowly build that thing from there. Look, if you gave me 2 options, if you said, I'm going to give you a really, really good defensive team that might not be that great offensively, or you're going to say, I'll give you a really, really good offensive team that might not be that great defensively, I would much rather have the Sixers, which is a good, stout, naturally instinctual defensive team, and let's bring them together in the offensive side, because I just think that's so much easier to do than doing it the other way around. I think it's easier to teach offense and get these guys going than it is to instill defensive mettle and discipline in a team that might not have it. You know, so I think they're in a good position there. You know, they're number 1, number 2, number 3 in all these categories: points in the paint, offensive rebounding, total field goals that they're taking versus other teams. They're killing other teams with turnovers. So, if they get their free throw shooting better than 17th or 18th in the league, and they get their three-point shooting better than 24th in the league, I mean, even just improving that helps. They can, start clobbering teams left and right. So I'm not really worried about it from a long-term perspective. Like, I think they got the base and the foundation down. But I think we're going to learn a lot about Brett Brown, because he's said on the record a million times before that he's not really into calling plays, and he just wants it to evolve organically. But sometimes it doesn't happen organically.
Kevin Kinkead, and last thing on the game from last night and everything, which was now I've seen Booker whip this team over and over and over again. He averages more points against the Sixers than any other team in the league except for Boston, and the Sixers are a pretty good defensive team. He scores 27. Yeah. Would you have liked to see someone other than Ben defending Booker? Because it seems that Booker has figured out a way to win that matchup every single time.
Yeah, well, I think Josh Richardson had most of him early, right? And then they kind of switched Ben on. Ben took a little bit later. I think that's what they did with, oh my God, what can't I think? Oh, Trey. They did that with Trey Young the other night, last week, where they kind of had Ben sort of switch on him in the fourth quarter. And Ben joked afterwards, and he said, I wasn't going to put a ton of effort into it early because I knew I would need it late, But, I don't know. I mean, it seems interesting for them to do, to make that defensive switch kind of in the fourth quarter. You'd think that technically, if you were doing okay with what you had earlier, you would keep it going that way. But I'm not really sure. They've had good luck. Trey Young at the time, that was his worst offensive performance of the season, and Kemba Walker went for 12 points at the beginning of the year. So I don't know, maybe you just sort of, to use a Brett Brown term, just shake Devin Booker's hand and move on to the next one. But it's a two days on the second game of a road trip. They've been doing a lot of traveling. They had a kind of an emotional come from behind win in Portland. So I kind of see this as being a one-off kind of thing. I don't know if they're going to get cooked on the perimeter as much as they were last year, specifically because you can't exploit J.J. Redick anymore. So I think they're going to be okay then.
He's Kevin Kinkead, and you can check out the piece and some video of the way Phoenix defended Ben Simmons last night, what the Sixers tried to do over at Crossing Broad. And, of course, Kevin Kinkead, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, pal.
Yeah, anytime. I'll see you guys.
Yeah, Kevin Kinkead, everybody. Good stuff out of him.